Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lodgge podcast. I am your host, Scott Milley, and welcome to episode 10. Season 2 has been off to a great start so far, and we're going to keep that here going today. So, joining me today is our uniquely talented guest, Steph Sandercock. How are you doing today, Steph?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Steph is a producer at Toronto's very own 13 a.m. Games, and then most recently worked on the kaiju brawler Dawn of the Monsters and released it across all major platforms. With over 5 years of experience in the video game industry and a long list of credits in linear media, Steph is an outstanding talent here in Ontario, and we are incredibly honored to welcome her to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about her career path, 13 a.m. Games and their latest and greatest, the challenges of localization, and much, much more. So, without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So, every time we start an episode, we always ask one question. So, for season 1, it was always about people's gaming habits and the best situation for them to like gaming in the morning, gaming at night, things like that. But with season 2, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So, what served as the catalyst for you getting into the video game industry? Was it a conference, a game? Like, not where did your career start, but why were you like, this is where I want to be? This is the industry I want to be a part of.
Oh, that's actually a really, really good question. Yeah, I can pinpoint it to a specific moment, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember the exact moment that I made the decision. So, I was at the time I was running my own company. I was running a tea company, and I wasn't doing so great. I was like just in like a really weird headspace. And my husband, Mike, he has been in the game industry for like 11 years, something like that at this point. But he was away at GDC and I was home alone and I was like kind of just feeling a bit down. And I'd been saving Night in the Woods because it had just come out.
Wow.
I was like, oh, I'm saving this. I want to play this game. So
Yeah.
sitting there playing Night in the Woods, and I just had this, I don't know, there's this revelation where I was like, oh my God, like something in this game just kind of spoke to me. And I had this like really strong emotional connection with it. And with every one of my friends being away at GDC at the time, I had like nobody to talk to. And I was like kind of bummed about it. And I was like, I need to pivot. I need to make a change. I need to do something. And there was something just calling me to make the shift into gaming, because I had the background in TV production. I was like, oh, maybe I can pivot and actually move into game production instead. And that's what encouraged me to actually just start reaching out to friends and finding out who was looking for production help and like whether I could intern or do like a part-time thing. It took a few months for everything to actually come together, but like I remember sitting there in my living room and having just this like, you need to do this. This is the next thing for you. And yeah, it was Night in the
Wow.
Woods. And I actually the next year I got to go to GDC, and I got to actually meet the writer on the game, and he had just won an award, a writing award, I think, at GDC for that game. And I got to actually thank him in person. I was like, hey, I'm actually here because of you. So it was like a nice little,
How often do
I
you
don't
get to
know,
meet your
turnaround in a year.
heroes? Like you get to
Yeah, I
meet the
mean,
people that actually like put you down that career path. Like I'm never going to be able to meet like some of my like heroes, right? Like that's amazing.
yeah, it was a weird conversation. He ended up mostly talking to me about how Enya owns a castle in Scotland. So I was like, I'm here to like thank you genuinely for like putting me on the path to get into the games industry. And he was like, you know, Enya owns a castle in Scotland. I was like, no, I don't know that. But thanks for the
Interesting.
info. So yeah, I don't know. It was a weird moment, but it was nice to meet him.
That's so cool that you're able to actually like go and meet them. That's
Mhm.
also one of the best intro stories ever. That's awesome. Because like the fact that you can pinpoint it, most people are like, oh, I grew up playing games with my family, or just like it was kind of the natural progression. You were like, no, like pivot, like full
No, it
pivot
wasn't
from
natural for me at all.
making
I
tea.
bounced in and out of gaming a lot throughout my life. Bounce into it, and then as a woman, it was always kind of like, oh, oh, you play games. Ugh, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should try and do you know, other more girly things, quote unquote. Although I hate that, whole concept of,
Yep.
only certain genders are allowed to do certain things, but you fall into that
And
at
agree
certain
more.
points in your life. So it took a while for me to find my way back to gaming, I think.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Mm.
Yeah. So one of the things that you did touch on, and I want to get a little more into, is that you did start your career in linear video,
I did.
more commonly known as television.
Mhm.
Um, what was it about production on the side of media that really attracted you there? Like, why did you go? Like, obviously, if you wanted to go in entertainment, but the fact that you actually went into production and managing, why was that something that
Yeah.
like that spoke to you?
Ooh, it didn't. It was an accident. No, that it was not the intention. So, I don't know, when I was about 14, 15, I was absolutely head over heels obsessed with, Lord of the Rings, the movies, the books, the whole shebang. And I got in this, like, really weird habit where I would watch, like, the special features on the DVDs, like, over and over and
Yeah,
over again. Um, Also the Shrek special features, I don't know, it was a weird time of my life, so I'd, like, kind of bounce back and forth between watching the Shrek special features and the Lord of the Rings special features. And I was like, "Oh my god, I either wanna be an animator or, like, work in audio." I wasn't quite sure, but I was kind of leaning towards something a little bit more artistic, more technical. For a long time, it was animation, and that was sort of the path that I was going into. But then I went off to university and it just like wasn't really a good fit for me. So I left university after 2 years and decided to go to college. And the only program that was open in January that I could find, just like after a quick Google search, I was like, I need to go back to school. Was a introduction to TV broadcasting or TV broadcasting at
yeah,
Seneca.
yeah, yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I liked watching all the special features for Lord of the Rings. I'm just going to go into broadcasting. Um, it was a very snap decision. I made it in like overnight. Got into the program somehow. I didn't realize it was actually a really competitive program, but I got in. And the entire time I was there, I was convinced I was going to go and become a sound designer. It was either a sound designer or like a newsroom director. Those were
Mhm.
like the two things that I mostly focused on while I was there. And then when I graduated, I needed to find work, and a friend of a friend of a friend needed a production assistant, like an in-office production assistant on a reality TV show called For Rent, which is kind of like House Hunters, but for rentals.
Okay.
Um, it was on HGTV, and I was like, sure, I'll take a job. I don't care what it is. Ended up just taking this production assistant job as a stopgap while I was gonna like look for sound design work. And then the production coordinator got promoted and they just needed someone to slot in and become a production coordinator. So they were like, hey, you're the production coordinator now. And that's kind of how I ended up in production. So,
Wow, those seem like two very different career paths, though. Like, we're gonna
oh,
talk
yeah.
about it in a little bit. That you're kind of able to do both now, right? You're
Yeah.
still able to focus on audio,
Yeah.
but like I feel like audio is a little more like siloed, right? And then when it comes to production, like those are like managerial skills, right? And like organizational skills. So like, do you find that those two really complement each other, or those are just two different passions of yours? Or audio is the passion, and then you just happen to be really good at organizing and managing people?
Um, It's complicated, but I find that working in audio, and actually having a technical skill is a huge asset as a producer because it allows you to like, I know what's going on the technical side of the game because I actually have a role that interfaces with the entire programming department. So, I'm never, like, talking about something that I don't actually understand. Like, I'm in Unity on a regular basis. Like, I know what our code base is. I know where to find everything. So, I'm not talking in the abstract. I'm talking about things that I actually am dealing with, and I'm just like I'm very involved in the systems, so it's having that technical base makes it way easier to be a producer.
That's kind of like a resounding theme that we've had like on the show is a lot of guests that we have and a lot of people in like bigger studios in Ontario. Bigger studios in Ontario aren't necessarily that large of teams. So a lot of
Mhm,
people tend to start in tech or they tend to start as a programmer and then move their way up to like a managerial role.
mhm.
And there's like every single person has been like, it's way better to know exactly what the issue is. Because one, if someone says something's taking too long, like you know what they're actually dealing with. So you either may give them more time or you're well aware that it should have gotten done quicker. Right. And, like you need to actually know what they're doing to be able to tell someone what you need. Right. So like that's awesome to hear though. That you're like it's much easier that you know exactly what everyone's talking about at all times and it makes your job as a producer a little bit easier.
It makes things so much easier. I don't understand like, there are a lot of producers, obviously, who don't have a technical side to their job, and that's completely fine,
Yeah, of
but
course.
I just having the ability to be able to actually talk about the systems that are in the game and to know exactly where they are. And when someone's talking about a specific bug or issue that they're dealing with, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know what script we're talking about. I know where that is. Like, it's it just makes life makes it easier and makes it more authoritative and like more, I don't know, like you can actually talk about it rather than just having to trust someone
And it kind of
just
like
because
lends
they
like
say something.
credibility to yourself, I
Yeah,
guess, right? Where it's
yeah.
just like, I know exactly what you're talking about, so you can't like either talk your way out of this, or it's like you can help figure out the problem with them at the time at that time.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of troubleshooting involved, especially like as we're getting towards like delivery of a project or something like that. Like I actually become pretty heavily involved in QA and like prepping milestone deliveries and actually knowing exactly what's going on under the hood is it's a beneficial skill. So
It's great for you,
highly
and
recommend.
probably great for your team as well, right? Like if you're answering to somebody, it's like it's nice to know that they know exactly what your issues are, and like
Yeah.
you're not talking to the wall or talking like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it helps to get people what they need because you actually know what they're asking for instead of having to go and ask about it to then come back to them. It kind of like you don't need to like look around for things as much. You're just like, "Oh, okay. I know what you're asking for. Here's how you can get it."
What was one skill that you learned during your time in linear media that you feel really prepared you for the video game industry?
Um, so I did a lot of very strange stuff in TV. I didn't really ever work on anything that I would call like a normal experience. I ended up in this like weird, I don't know, cycle where I was just making stuff that was just like the most bizarre, challenging stuff. It was never like wake up, go to the office, make a thing, talk to some people and then go home. It was always like something crazy. So I did I did one show, it was like terrible show. I made a lot of bad reality TV, I'm just to preface it,
Sometimes those are
that
the
most
best
people
ones,
have never
though.
heard of. There's so much bad stuff. But I worked on this show for the Weather Channel called Loaded, which is about truckers driving through bad weather. I think it only ran for the one season.
But that's like the
Um,
hotness. That's like if you like every commercial right on A and E and stuff like that's
we were
all
trying to
people
ride
care
the
about.
wave. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
right.
10
Yeah,
years ago, trying to ride that wave of like ice road truckers. But
exactly.
it was just it was a weird one. So we had like three different truckers who would drive around, one in Canada and two in the States. And we just kind of like storm chased with them. But so it was coordinating like three different trucks that were constantly moving with three different crews sitting in the back of the truck, like sitting on the truckers' beds,
Yep,
just kind of like bouncing around back there behind the trucker.
that
Um,
seems safe.
yeah, totally safe. And they would call all the time and be like, all right, we had a detour. We're going to this other town. I need you to find us somewhere to eat, somewhere to stay. We need some, new materials delivered to us. We need tapes. We were still recording on tape back then. It was before the like digital
Mhm.
um had like fully taken off. So it was like coordinating all these like three different groups of people driving around trying to chase hurricanes at like 3 in the morning sometimes because truckers drive overnight. And I just remember being like, what is this? What am I doing? And it was really overwhelming at the time, but like the ability to, I don't know, just kind of like manage that and stay calm in these extremely weird situations that would come up. I feel like it makes me not too freaked out about the kind of things that happen in game development because like game development is weird. It's difficult. It's complicated, but like okay, well at least it's not that,
It's
like
not 3 a.m. and people driving
yeah,
across country weird. Like,
exactly. I go to bed at a normal time and I at least it's not that. So this is manageable. Um, yeah, dealing with just those like very, very crazy situations has kind of like desensitized me a little bit to like just like weird things that happen. So something crazy will happen. It'll be like a somewhat emergency situation. I'm just like, okay, we can handle this. This is
yeah,
fine. What do we need to do?
it's just
Um,
reality TV just scarred you so much that now
yeah, it did. It did.
everyone else would normally panic about, you're like, this is
This is
fine. Like,
fine. This is fine. Yeah. Like we did a lot of like very remote shooting and living in the woods for months and that kind of
did
stuff.
you ever have
So
to do any of it on location?
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. A fair bit of location stuff and there's no normal locations, I guess. So yeah, yeah, living in the woods for like 4 months and trying to manage a TV shoot where you're like 2 hours from anything, and there's no actual internet, and all you have is a satellite phone, and like, yeah, living in the woods with a bunch of rednecks.
This is supposed to be a video game centered podcast, but I feel like I could talk to you about this for hours. Like, I feel like you have so many stories of
Yeah,
being
TV was a
off
weird
the beaten
time,
path.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but you know, if you can handle that, you can handle anything. So it's definitely
Wow.
a transferable skill.
So from living in the woods for 4 months at a time and producing all of these crazy shows to tea,
Oh yeah.
was that just a huge overcorrection? Was that something that you found like to be relaxing and calming, or why was it that you ended up opening up your own online tea shop?
Hmm. Well, I had a bit of downtime because I was a freelancer in TV. So I had a bit of bit of downtime, and I was also just really burnt out. Like,
I can imagine so, based on the stories.
yeah, just all the crazy things that had happened. Like I'd been in TV for like 6 years or something at that point, and I was just like tired. Um, and I hadn't really ever taken like a significant amount of time off. So I was just getting really into tea on the side, and I started doing this weird little side project just to kind of keep myself calm and sane, where I was mixing tea blends based on books.
Hmm.
Um, so I was like, oh yeah, I could, you know, if this book were a tea, what tea would it be? I guess. And I was taking this tea sommelier course.
That was my next question. I was like, I did not know that was a thing, and that
I didn't
is
know either.
awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. I don't know. I like just taking random courses, learning random skills, and I was like, "Oh, tea is interesting. Oh, you can be a tea sommelier. That sounds fun." So I took this certification and just in my spare time and learned how to be a tea sommelier, which is fun. Learning how to tell what kind of tea it is just by drinking it.
That's so like
That kind of stuff.
for most people that wouldn't be like wildly. That's so cool. Like that was like the highlight when I was like looking through your career, and I was like, what? I'm gonna need to ask about this. That's so interesting to me.
Yeah, it's the same thing for wine, but
Of
it's
course, it
just tea. There's also whiskey, I think. There's a few different kinds of specialized sommelier certifications you can get.
was that something that you did like you wanted to open the tea shop and you wanted to start selling them. Was it something that you wanted to learn just to be better at the craft, or was it something that you had just always found like enticing?
It was more just like a side hobby. I've always got like a million hobbies on the go. So it was just intended to be that. And then I had a TV show that I was waiting to get greenlit for like quite a long time. We had done a season one of a show and we were waiting for season two to get greenlit. And it was supposed to be like a few weeks.
Oh
But then a
no,
few weeks became a few more and a few more and a few more. And I was just kind of sitting around unemployed waiting for the show to get greenlit. And I was like, I'll just open an Etsy store. How hard can that be? And then I just did that for like 4 years, 5 years. Um, yeah. And then that actually just became enough money to not have to go back into TV.
that's what I was gonna say. And I was like, you went from there, and then you ended up going to the industry that you're in now and love. But
Yeah.
like clearly you were good at it. Like if it was something that you were
Mhm.
able to pay the bills for 4 or 5 years and like it was your own business, I'm curious as to why did you end up walking away from that?
It was the money was okay, but I was kind of at a point
Kind of
where
cap.
if I wanted to scale up, I would have actually had to get employees and equipment, and I was kind of just enjoying doing it just on my own, and, I didn't really want to turn it into a business with employees. I kinda liked it being a solo venture, but just it was actually just the physical limitations of filling tea bags over and over, like, you can only do so much of that before you get tendinitis in both of your arms.
That is fair.
That's what I discovered, and, I didn't wanna invest, like, $10,000 into, like, filling machines and stuff. I was like, "This is just" it becomes a completely different kind of business at that point, and so I decided to move into games, but it was only supposed to be on a part-time basis. Like, I was kind of just doing it as, like, to test the waters while also running the tea company, and I just liked it so much in games that I just let the tea company just kind of quietly fade into the background, and the games thing became full time.
And because I feel you do you get a little bit more enjoyment out of tea now, now that it isn't paying the bills.
Um, yeah, I do actually, yeah. Yeah, living in that, like, tea-focused environment all the time, I did kind of like lose my ability to just enjoy it for its own sake, you know? Like you kind of become a bit of a snob about it. Like it's
You're a
kind of a
tea
stereotype.
sommelier.
Sommelier, it's such a snobby term, right? But I definitely did become like, oh well, you know, I couldn't possibly just drink a bagged tea. Now I'm like, oh yeah, whatever.
Who
Tetley, that's
cares?
fine. I
Yeah, get
don't
it in
care,
me.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the point now where I'll drink anything. It's fine. But
I love that. Went back. Yeah,
yeah.
you found what you loved about it. You went back to your roots.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, you know, like I'm not picky about it now, but it's still a really, really it's a cool industry. Like
Yeah.
tea was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's like you,
Yeah.
like my entire family and like my partner, everything. That's there's just tea everywhere. There's like a bunch of tea in my cabinet that's just like been a thing for a long time. So I read that. It's like that's wildly interesting to me. I would love to be able to learn, be able to like taste the little differences and stuff.
It is cool.
Back on track because I knew
Mm,
I'm like we're gonna talk about tea forever. Um, you made a comment that yeah you finished with the tea shop and decided to go part time into games. What
mhm.
was it starting at 13 a.m. games? So did you started there part time and you just slowly a little bit more and a little bit more, or was it like you know what? No, this is my full time gig. This is great.
It it was intended to be part-time, so it happened very suddenly. I had been talking with them for a couple of months. Their previous producer had left, I think in the spring of 2017. He went on to go start his own thing. That's Dave Proctor. I think he started at Mighty Yell. He's a great guy.
Yep.
Most people in Ontario know Dave,
Mighty Yell, friend of the
but
show. Yep.
yeah, yeah, he's a great guy. So he had left, I think, in the spring. He had been one of the original founders of the company, and they'd kind of just said, "Oh, well, how hard can it be to just like operate a game studio without a producer? Like we don't need a producer. We can just all kind of like contribute, and it'll be fun. We'll figure it out." I fast forward like a few months, and they were like, "Oh, this is actually really, really difficult." But they were in kind of like a limbo thing. They were waiting for some Ontario Creates money to come in, so they couldn't
Yeah.
actually afford to hire me. So there was a bit of a back and forth, and it was like, okay, well, we want to hire you, but we can't afford to pay you yet. So stand by, and we'll let you know when our funding comes through. And at the time, I was just talking about kind of like interning. I was like, maybe I can just work for you guys for free for a little bit, just to see if I even like this, like if the skills are even actually transferable. So they called me one day and they're like, "Hey, we're having a kickoff meeting for our new project tomorrow." And that was for Double Cross. Like it's just a kickoff meeting, but we think if you can come by just for that meeting, it'll be like half a day, maybe one day of meetings, and then we probably won't need you for a few weeks or a few months after that. But just come on by and meet the team. So I showed up for this meeting thinking, okay, it's going to be one day of work or like 4 hours or something, I think is what they had said. And I met for the whole day. And then they were like, "Can you come back tomorrow?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." So I came back and then it became 2 days. And then they were like, "Okay, can you just work here full time now and come in again tomorrow?
They'll figure it out. Yeah. Like
And we'll just figure it out." So yeah, I was supposed to be there like 2 or 3 days a week or something. And then just from day one, they were like, "No, no, no, you work here now." And then I never left. I've been there for 5 years. Actually, 5 years last week. So I just crossed over 5 years.
congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I find that really interesting because you came in via very much like on a part time basis, but you were part time never.
Yeah, exactly. It was yeah, it became full-time from day one, but it was intended to just be a part-time gig. I was supposed to be just helping them out with like a little bit of organization, a little bit of finance stuff, that kind of stuff. But no, it turns out they actually needed someone full-time
When did you end up
because
getting to do some of the audio stuff where we like you're finally able to kind of use that passion as well?
that happened pretty early on. So about 6 months into working there, we were at the stage on Double Cross where we started actually needing audio. It turns out that Dave, in addition to being the producer at 13 a.m., was also in charge of the audio. So him leaving had also left kind of like a gap there.
Got it.
And we were just talking about this one day, and I was like, "Well, I'm trained in this. I know how to do this. I don't know how to use Unity, but I know how to use audio editing software, and I'm trained in Pro Tools and all that kind of stuff." And they were like, "All right, cool, you're hired. Go learn Unity." So I just opened up Unity one day and was like, "All right, let's figure this
Self
out."
taught? Unity was self taught?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Wow.
So just started doing it one day, and then I think we had 3 or 4 months until Double Cross had to be delivered, and they were like, "We got to get all of the audio in the game before that." Which obviously, as the producer, I knew what the deadline was.
Yeah, that's fair.
I
You
was like,
knew
"Oh,
you knew what you were getting
okay,
into when you started doing the audio. You were like, "Oh, this
yeah,
is you now." You're like, "Oh, okay."
yeah." So learned Unity in a very short amount of time, and got all the audio in, and then just kept doing it, and did it on Double Cross, and again on Dawn of the Monsters. And yeah, we never actually hired another audio director. I don't make the sounds. We have actual sound designers who do a lot of the sound creation, but I handle all of the implementation, and yeah, it's fun. I like it.
What do you think? Like, so, like, you came on right before Runbow would have been released on Switch, correct?
Yeah, it was around when Rumbo was released. I can't remember if it was right before or right after.
So, for those who don't know, Runbow is a 1 to 9 player party game, with an aesthetic that I find much more appealing than most of those type of games. Most of like the heroes and character creation things like that. I just really like the main character. I really like the black and white. I just
Hmm,
think it's
yeah,
awesome.
Satora. Yeah, she's awesome.
Um, so going from something like that where you kind of came on right when something was releasing, compared to Double Cross, where you even said like you were in that first meeting and all the way to release. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience of being able to see something in the concept stage all the way to release date, considering especially in production where nothing ever goes as planned, and this is your first game like A to Z.
Yeah, Double Cross was a really interesting challenge. When I came on, there was a prototype level where you were kind of like on the back of a truck. We had the sling mechanic that was working, like the hook and swing. It was working. It ended up changing a lot in the final gameplay, but we you could fight a little dinosaur, and you could run across the back of a truck, and you could like swing. And that level was called Caravan. And then it was the first level they were working on, and I think it was also the last level we ever finished on the game. That was like an ongoing kind of like painful level to work on.
Yeah.
We just kept redoing Caravan over and over and over. Um, but that game was done really, really quickly. I think start to end, it was only about 9 months of production.
Whoa.
Yeah, everything had to be done very, very quickly on that game because we didn't have a huge budget on it.
Got it.
And we did end up managing to secure a publisher on it, but it was actually only quite a small investment that they had made. So it needed to be done before it ran out of money. So managing that was actually quite challenging, knowing that we had a very limited budget right from the beginning. Because I think originally we only had enough money for about 6 months of work on it, and we knew it needed a lot more than that. So we were really, really aggressive in trying to find a publisher to give us any extra money that we could just to extend the amount of production that we could do on that game. And we did get it up to like 9 months, which frankly we could have used more time on that project, but it always felt very rushed. It was a very quick production, and we always felt like we were racing against the clock to get it done.
Yeah, it's a sprint. Like if you're looking at like most game production, right? You're looking 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, at least like everyone that I've talked to be at 2 to 3 years, like almost minimum, depending on
Yeah.
the studio.
100%.
Mobile tends to be that year, right? You hear 9 months, you're thinking a mobile turnout.
Yeah.
Even on the lower end, right? So it's like that's yeah, that feels like a sprint and a half. The fact that you didn't even get one full calendar year under production.
Yeah, it was a sprint. We did have to crunch on it multiple times, which
Oof.
is now something we don't do anymore because it kind of ruined us for a while. Like crunch just sapped all of our energy, and we actually had a really hard time recovering from making Double Cross just because of the sheer amount of overtime that we put in on the last few months of that game, just because we didn't have enough money. It was a learning experience, pretty substantially for us.
So being able to take all of those lessons learned and being able to bring them into the current shining jewel of 13 AM games, which is Dawn of the Monsters, originally released in March of this past year. Um, what was the inspiration behind doing a kaiju brawler? Because if you like, even a lot of games, you can see there's like a similar like DNA, or a lot of studios rather,
Mhm.
but just seeing like Runbow to Double Cross to Dawn of the Monsters, it's hard to find that through line. So I'm curious of like where did this passion for a kaiju brawler destroying cities, where did that come from?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there about it's hard to find the through line because the when I was starting at the studio, they were always like, "Oh, we like to do something different every time."
Uh,
You can really see that with our first 3 games that, like, it's hard to find that connective tissue. We're trying to learn from that going forward and not try and reinvent the wheel every time. But definitely for the first 3 projects, it's like, burn it to the ground, start
I was gonna
again,
say
new
maybe be
new
able to
code
take some
base.
assets into the next game, like make your
100%.
lives a little easier.
That's what we're trying to do now, but that wasn't what we were trying to do then. The kaiju thing actually came from our CEO, Alex Rushdie. He is a kaiju nut. It's like his entire life. So it's definitely originated with like his passion for the genre. Um, but he was, how do I put this? With Double Cross, we kind of erred on the side of being too generic, and not really committing to a niche. We were trying to make a cool story, we were trying to make cool mechanics, but we didn't really go after a particular demographic or a particular niche or even like a particular style of gameplay. Like everything was just maybe like a little bit too broad, a little too general.
Just try to hit all the
And
check marks.
yeah, exactly. And like we really enjoyed playing that game. It's a very fun game, but when it came around time to actually start marketing it as we were starting to wrap up the project, we had a really hard time marketing the game because it didn't really have like a central identity. Like it was trying to be a platformer and a puzzle solver and be able to, be played in any order. And it had commentary on like, police corruption and, like it was trying to do a lot of things. Um, so yeah, I remember being at PAX trying to demo that game and trying to explain to people as they were coming up like what it is. I was like, yeah, it's like a platformer mystery solver about intergalactic policing. It's just you couldn't really sum it up. So it made it hard to like actually know who the game was for. And we didn't want to repeat that mistake with Dawn of the Monsters. So we knew with our next project that we wanted to have a really good focus on finding a niche and catering to that niche like pretty tightly. So with Alex having been involved in kaiju fandom for his entire life, he was like, there is something here. Like this is a very passionate group of people who are just not being fed. Like there were at the time no kaiju games. That's changed a little bit. Like we weren't the only people to try and like exploit this
Capitalize
niche.
on that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a handful of them now, and that's awesome.
Because you have a community now, right? You have like other studios
Yeah,
you can kind of wink at or like even join in on sales or whatever it might be.
yeah, it's actually been really nice. Like as we started development on that, it was like, oh, other people are seeing that this niche needs to be filled as well. But Alex was really like insistent on like kaiju fans. They are desperate for games. So we went pretty hard into that. We did a lot of research into kaiju fandom because originally Alex was the one who was really passionate about it, and he knew he needed to get all of us on board. So we actually had like team movie nights, where he would like give a little PowerPoint presentation about like the history of the original Godzilla movie, or the history of like we watched Pat Labor and Pacific Rim and the Gamera trilogy from the 90s. And he was really good about giving us all of this context. And then we would all watch these movies together. And like, so we would have these touchstones. And he actually turned pretty much the whole studio into kaiju fans. And then we hired on a few other people who really loved kaiju as well. And it's just kind of became our thing for like 3 years. But I would say most people in the studio are like already pretty big fans of like anime and like other Japanese stuff. So adding kaiju into the mix wasn't a huge sell. Like we're just like, oh, another thing. This is cool, and we could just kind of like connect to it that way. But yeah, that's where that came from.
It's interesting being able to see in a studio like that where the passion's already there, right? Like you're not having to like convert people to something. It's like, oh, we're doing this party brawler. It's like, oh, I don't play those. I play mobile, or I like Souls games or whatever it might be. But it's like the fact that you're able to kind of get everybody all under one roof and having Alex's unbridled passion like for that industry. How many versions of the VHS does he own now?
Oh goodness, I was at his house the other day. I think
The original Godzilla,
it's
right?
over 30.
Yeah,
He's got, and it's Godzilla 98.
98.
It's
Got
the
it.
terrible one from the late 90s. I think he's got at least 30 copies of the VHS just, like, in these little stacks in his house, and he's always looking for more, so if you ever see one, you let him know.
I will.
He'll buy
I
it.
just remember seeing that tweet and I was like, this studio, like these guys care a lot about what they're doing. That's really
Mhm,
fun. What's one aspect I have to ask this as a producer? What's
mhm.
one aspect of the game that you guys didn't really showcase in trailers or in the promo material, but you love? Like, what's a little thing that maybe even people didn't notice, like a sound effect or something that you're like, that's my favorite thing right there.
So, I think my favorite thing is, so my, like, go-to, character that I play is always Ganira. She's the big giant crab. I've got her up here. This is the other thing. We actually did make,
Oh my
like,
god.
action figures. Yeah, we've got Ganira. I've got a Megadon up there too. But she's my girl. She's my favorite. But she's got, like, a little minion that you summon. It doesn't have a name. It's just Crab. It's just a little cute little crab that shows up, and it's your little pet, and it fights for you, and it, like, takes aggro and makes Ganira a pretty accessible character because I'm not very good at Dawn of the Monsters. But when I play with Ganira, I'm all right. I do okay. But my favorite thing is the crab, and um, we all got really attached to the crab in the studio.
No one named it.
Um, we proposed some names. I think there might be an in-lore actual name that
Got
our
it.
writer has, but crab just stuck. It's called Crab in Engine, and we just got used to
I
calling it
like it.
crab.
I'm just
Yeah, it's the
curious.
best.
Yeah.
But my favorite part was we had to start doing the sound effects for crab. And, we'd all gotten just, like, so attached to this little guy that, like, anytime it got hit or died, you just, like, feel bad. So I remember telling our sound designer, like, "I want you to feel bad when this crab gets hurt. I want you to exploit the maternal instinct for this crab. This is your son, and, you wanna not let him die." So he was like, "Okay, we can do that." So the sound effects for crab are these heartbreaking little sounds whenever it takes damage. It's just like, and it just breaks your heart. And when it dies, you feel terrible. And yeah, our sound designer just absolutely nailed that. Steve, you completely followed my direction on that, and it just makes me happy. It's like the one thing that we just had this idea, and it just worked exactly as intended. And all I was trying to do was, like, spread the love and attachment to crab, to other people so that they would feel bad when the crab was hurt. And I've had a few people be like, "Oh, I love that little crab guy." I'm like, "Yes,
That's my favorite.
yes, that's my favorite. He's my boy." So,
Oh my god,
yeah.
that's a way better answer than I could have ever asked for. That's so good. It's like a dying crab is your favorite part of the game. It's like
Yeah.
the whimper that it makes as it gets knocked out of existence. Like,
Mhm. It's the little things that make you happy.
so one of the things too you were talked about, you guys were being able to focus on a niche with Dawn of the Monsters. A lot of that being having a bit of success in Japan.
Mhm,
Do you had a big localization focus when it comes to Japan? And I know that you guys were out there recently. Can you tell me a
mhm.
little bit about that specific challenge?
Yeah, definitely. Localization is a pretty big focus at 13 a.m. We have a lot of I don't know, there's a lot of diversity at our studio. Like we have people from a lot of different countries. Like our writer, he's from the Basque region in Spain, and our art director, he's from Brazil, and our animators from Brazil. We have a lot of people who speak a lot of different languages. So we've always been pretty cognizant about localization, partly just because people want their families to be able to play the games that they make.
Of course.
Um, which, yeah, it makes it kind of like a personal thing. But the other thing has been localizing into Japanese as like a priority. So this is our third time localizing into Japanese. Um, it was a really big struggle on Double Cross. Like we really went through it with that Japanese translation. Just because we didn't take a lot of things into consideration. Like it's not a language that works like any other language. So if you have systems that just don't take into consideration the fact that there's no spaces in Japanese, and the characters are very different dimensions, and the legibility changes a lot. Um, there's just a lot that doesn't work the same way as other like Romanized languages. And that really caught us out on Double Cross, and we didn't want it to catch us out as much on Dawn of the Monsters. So we, from the very beginning, we were like taking into consideration the fact that this game had to translate into Japanese, especially because it's a kaiju game. And if it
Yes,
doesn't
like
localize into
that's
Japanese, then what are
yeah.
you even doing?
I couldn't agree more.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah. But the other thing is this is our first time actually doing voiceover in a game. And from day one, we knew we wanted to also have Japanese voiceover. Um, so we did it, and it's not released yet. That's going to be coming at the beginning of 2023. But the full Japanese translation, the full Japanese VO, um, I'm already playing with it. It's awesome. It's like the coolest thing to play that game with Japanese voices.
It's the
And
argument of sub versus dub, right? Like you have
yeah,
like a lot of anime fans and stuff where it's like this is creator's intent, like it needs to be sub, right? Like
100%.
uh,
Yeah, and you can do the text in English and the voice in Japanese,
perfect, yeah.
so that
Yeah, yeah.
you get the full experience if you want. But yeah, the Japanese voice actors just knocked it out of the park as well. Like I'm actually so excited for that to get released, because it's incredible. They did such, like, the English voice actors also did an amazing job, but like we're the only people who've heard the Japanese voices up until now, and they're just so cool. Like we just get so much joy out of actually playing that game with those voices. They only went in like a couple weeks ago, so it's still like this fresh, new, exciting thing.
Like this just sounds right. Like this is
Oh,
just
it
the yeah,
sounds it sounds
genuine.
so cool.
Alex must be
Yeah.
losing his mind. It's
Yeah,
be
the
like,
first time he played, he was like,
this
"Oh
is
my god,
perfect.
this
Yeah.
is so cool." Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit of a dream come true actually to get that
So that
to
was
get that
something
in.
that you guys really learned with Double Cross, like you said. What was one part of that? Like, so besides, what's the best way to word this? So like when you look at the like subtitles and stuff, you're saying like a lot of the other major languages that end up getting localization is Romanized, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it might be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, but those are really the only issues you're running into.
Mhm.
Um, so what was one thing in particular that you felt like you had really learned on Double Cross? I know you guys started at the beginning of Dawn of the Monsters with that in mind, but what was
Mhm.
something that you learned during that struggle of time trying to localize on Double Cross and being like, I am making sure day one that this is something that I focus on so that doesn't happen to me again.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get it perfect the second time around, but it was definitely smoother. One of the things was just like a lot more familiarity with our localization system, and knowing exactly how that system was going to work from day one, and like how we wanted to lay out the spreadsheet, how the keys were going to work. Like everything just like on the back end was set from the very beginning. Whereas on Double Cross, we were still like really not that familiar with the system that we wanted to use. We were still kind of like exploring how we wanted to do that and doing experiments. Um, with Dawn of the Monsters, it was like day one, this is exactly how we're going to do our localization. We thought it through, we made documentation for it, we tested it, everything. There's room for improvement next time around again, because we're still having issues with there not being spaces in Japanese. It really does mess a lot of things up. Um, but the legibility improved a lot. Like I remember us really struggling with finding a good font on Double Cross, and like the first time that we implemented Japanese, it just looked bad.
Is it like specifically
Um,
like size, or is it like
yeah,
just a certain particular font because you need to be able to
it's
see,
both.
yeah,
It's
a
both.
little more
Yeah.
Japanese?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that like just don't work as well in Japanese script. Like I remember in Double Cross we had like a bit of an over reliance on like bolding text and like italicizing text. And those things just don't work very well in a lot of Japanese fonts. Like if you bold fonts at a small size, they get really like crowded, especially with
Yeah.
kanji. Like you kanji becomes completely illegible. Like you just can't rely on that as a thing.
Oh,
So finding a font early on and like actually testing those fonts was was a good call. We didn't run into that issue, but I remember there being issues on Double Cross of just like, ugh, this looks bad, and like we had made a lot of like assets that were hand drawn in English, and like we had made some of our own English fonts, and then it was like, oh well, this doesn't work in other scripts. This is just doesn't make any sense. We also localized that game into Russian, and we had a similar issue with that as well. It was just we weren't really thinking about like the end result of the localization from day one. But with Dawn, we didn't run into those issues where we had to completely redo specific assets and completely change the system because it just didn't work. Um, Still room for improvement, but
That's
you
something I
know,
never
you learn
thought
a little
about.
more every time.
That's something
Yeah.
I never thought about though. With like in so like most games, right? Especially games that don't have voiceover, they rely so much, yeah, on that like bold or italicized or like shaking text to like convey emotion or convey
Hmm.
tone. So being able to try to translate that into a completely like different language like that must be, yeah, a unique challenge. I never thought about that part of the translation of how much is actually being said based on formatting, not just the words themselves.
Yeah, and then that formatting actually, like, because we use XMLs, like that formatting is in the XML itself. It ends up with a lot of like issues with tagging things, and like there's just a lot of like little tiny back end issues that kept cropping up on Double Cross. Just trying to like reduce that stuff happening the second time around was like I think our tech team did a really good job with it.
Say so. I'm really looking forward to actually being able to hear that.
Yeah.
Um, so the last thing about Dawn of the Monsters is there's a area called New Toronto.
Mm.
How important was it for the team to have something that was so close to home that you thought was a way that you had to bake it into the narrative, bake it into the lore? Why was that something that you guys focused on?
It was It was really important. So I remember really early on, we were trying to decide what areas, like what cities the game was going to encompass. So we knew that we wanted it to be real world locations, because Double Cross, it was a fantastical planet jumping kind of thing. We could just kind of do whatever we wanted. Planet made of goo, planet that's all arcades, that kind of stuff. But we knew that we wanted Dawn to actually take place on Earth and be set in real cities. So we actually picked all of the cities that were chosen are ones that actually have a personal connection to the studio. Um, so we have Toronto, obviously, because that's where we are. And we just never really see it represented in games as or even movies as
Exactly.
itself.
That's what I wanted to
Like,
ask, and I was like, "That's so cool to me." There's so many people, there's so many games, and like entertainment that gets made in Toronto or gets made in most of Ontario doesn't like Toronto, but Toronto, you know what I mean? It's like it is the
yeah.
capital. But yeah, like you don't see it represented very often, so I thought it was really interesting. Please continue.
Yeah, like no one ever lets Toronto just like be Toronto. We're always like, oh, it's filmed in Toronto, but it's New York, it's Chicago, it's,
Yep.
Philadelphia, it's whatever, right? Like it never actually gets to be itself. And like working in TV and film before that, like the amount of times that I filmed in Toronto and been like, oh yeah, this is New York. It's Brooklyn. It's not. It's Toronto. You always get like a fun time as well living in Toronto and like watching movies and being like, I know that intersection.
I know exactly
This
where
is
that
this
is.
was filmed here. So actually letting Toronto be Toronto, it was fun for us, but we also got to put in all these like little Easter eggs. Like we had a great time just like brainstorming all the locations that things could take place and like little billboards and little Canadian in jokes. Like there's little jokes about like the concerned children's advertisers commercials from the 90s of like don't you put it in your mouth, and there's like a billboard in there for Zellers, but it's Zillers like Godzilla.
I
Like
did.
there's
I
like
saw that one. I definitely saw that one. Yeah.
we had a really good time with that kind of stuff. But I think from day one we knew that two of the locations that had to be in the game were Toronto and Tokyo, and it was just figuring out what the other ones were going to be. Um, but yeah, that was kind of like a personal victory, and it's been nice to see people actually connect with that and enjoy that. Because I can't really think of that many other games that are set in Toronto. Like the only other one I can think of, like I think Soma is technically set in Toronto, but I don't think you ever go outside.
Yep.
And then that's only the beginning that it takes place in Toronto anyway. Someone else told me there was another game recently, another kaiju game, like a smaller indie project that part of it took place in Toronto. So we're not the only one anymore.
I do. I do. I'm pretty sure that was the first story about Dawn of the Monsters that we shared on the Lodge. At least like one of the first, like two or three, because that was like a focus for us, like in the team. Like
Hmm.
obviously we cover like a lot of different news stories on a regular basis, but like those ones are the ones that I highlight and I throw to the team, and I'm like, look at this. I'm like, this is awesome. I was like, 13 AM games, one being a member, and two like we don't get to see that very often. And working on this side of the video game industry, it's fun to be able to see that kind of stuff and be like, oh, I
We
know
did put
exactly where
one
that
little
is.
Easter egg in. Now that I think about it, we have a cut scene where in the first First World, which is Toronto. The boss of that area, Torgara, she's like a big lightning creature. Um, we're showing her off like clinging to the CN Tower, and there's like an explosion in the background. And if you look at where the explosion takes place, it's actually where our office used to be.
Yes, that's
Which we don't
all.
have the office anymore because we're all work from home. But like the thing that's blowing up, that's our old office.
I love that though. That's awesome. And only you
Yeah.
guys would know that. I don't think anyone else is
Yeah,
gonna map
yeah.
that out, right? But that's like for
There's
you.
some little tiny stupid Easter eggs in the game that are just for us, but
Get a kick
that's
out of
one of
it though,
them.
I'm sure, when you play through it. Like,
Yeah.
I know what that is.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a pretty good segue leading into the last part of our conversation, where I want to talk a little bit about Ontario, as this is
Mm,
the Lodge podcast, powered by Interactive Ontario, support from Ontario Creates. Our focus is really celebrating and championing the Ontario video game and IDM industry as a whole. So as someone who's been working in media in Canada for almost a decade or over a decade now,
mhm.
how do you feel about where Ontario is headed? And do you feel that since you entered the gaming industry in 2017, do you think that the community has gotten stronger? Do you think that it's kind of been the same, or do you think it's gotten more separated?
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, pretty much my entire career has been somewhat reliant on, Ontario Creates OMDC, kind of from day one. So pretty familiar with that. It obviously it's different in games than it is in film and TV, but it's hard to say whether or not like it's gotten closer or further apart. There's been a lot of good things that have happened, particularly during the pandemic with regards to like advocacy. Like we weren't involved with Interactive Ontario before the pandemic. We had talked about it, but we didn't really think that we had anything to contribute to it. And then during the pandemic, it was like free membership for a certain amount of time to kind of
Mm-hmm.
like bring people together, right? And then we hopped in and actually saw the value in that kind of space. And we've been in it ever since. So on one hand, I feel more connected to the industry because we actually are involved in that kind of stuff now when we never used to be. On the other hand, people just don't see each other anymore. Like we used to have like, monthly game dev events. Like there used to be Torontaru. That never came back, right? And like that was a nice kind of like monthly. I didn't go every month, but the option was there to have that kind of like stress relief and be able to meet with other fellow game devs and kind of, complain and vent and play Galaga,
Yep.
which is mostly what people did. But so that kind of stuff has definitely been lost. Like I feel like I don't actually see people in person. Like you were mentioning how we were just in Japan. We were over there to demo Dawn of the Monsters at Bit Summit in Kyoto. And this game dev came up to me from Toronto and he was like, "Hey, I know you guys. You're from Toronto." And I was like, "Yeah, we are." And he goes, "I'm from Toronto too." And we hadn't met before, but we were both Toronto game devs. And he was like, we talked for like 40 minutes. And I'd never met this guy before in my life. We had a great conversation. And like halfway through, we were like, this is nice. Like, this is actually really nice to be able to talk to a fellow Toronto game dev who knows what I'm talking about, who like I don't have to explain anything. Like we know exactly where each person is from and what we're talking about, even though we've never met each other before. And there was just this really nice moment of in-person connection. And then we were like, why is this happening in Kyoto, Japan? Why is this not happening at home in Toronto? Like, why does no one see each other anymore? It was just kind of this like, it was a joy, but also kind of like a sadness because like I feel that connection has been a bit lost, and I hope it comes back, but I
I think we're
don't.
slowly on the way. We're having like there's
Mm,
more and more like in-person events, right? We like Pocket Gamer a few months ago.
hmm.
VRTO wasn't long ago, right? And there's I think we're getting back to that, hopefully. But
I
it's
hope
funny.
so.
I've heard that from numerous people of being like in GDC, like a bunch of people went to GDC and all from Ontario, and that's where they met and that's where they hung out. They've never seen each other in Canada, but
Yeah.
they all saw each other on the other coast. And then same with like Gamescom, right? It's like we always have
Hmm.
those groups that go and they spend all this time together. They go to dinner, they become great friends, and then when they're down the street from each other, they're in Zoom calls. This is as close as they get, right?
Yeah, that I mean, that is just a weird thing in Toronto. Like, yeah, there's always people you run into at GDC, and I haven't been to GDC since the pandemic started, and I'm like, I'm really missing that. I'm missing that connection. But yeah, you see these people in California, and you never see them at home. It's
Right.
like, I'll see you again next year, even though we're like down the road from each other. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But um, yeah, yeah, I do kind of miss those opportunities for like more regular connection through those like informal kind of events. But at the same time, like the rise of Discord, I would say throughout the pandemic has been a huge, like a huge point of connection. I didn't use Discord very much before the pandemic, and now I use Discord for everything. Like our entire company is run through Discord. That's where we have all of our meetings. That's where we actually see each other. That's where we hang out. That's the office. The office is Discord. But also there's discords for, you know, the Toronto game dev community. There's a Discord for Interactive Ontario. There's all these places where people actually are connecting with each other, just not face to face. And the sharing of information has gotten a lot better too. Like there it used to be harder to get information about things like issues that you're having with OIDMTC and, you know, what bank are you with or what insurance company are you using, or these like little daily business things that people are actually like unraveling and talking about and trying to get change made on. Like I remember this whole thing, I think it was last year, about people talking about insurance and people talking about how CMF's requirements for insurance are kind of ludicrous, honestly, for what you're doing. And that did actually lead to some change because people were actually sharing the information about companies that they had worked with and discussions that they had had with the CMF. And that kind of stuff wasn't really happening before, at least not at the same speed. Like there's actually changes happening. And like Lucy at IO has been incredible at actually bringing all these people together and like getting change made to things like OIDMTC. Like it's a huge deal. Like as a producer, as the person who is the one with the pulse on the financial viability of the studio on a day-to-day basis, having something like that be more reliable than it was before, it actually is like life changing to a studio. And I don't know that we would have gotten that changed before the pandemic, or not at the same scale. Like it happened faster than I would have expected, but it's been
That's
good.
I love to hear those kind of things, obviously. But yeah, that was one thing as well. Like for me, is like we were able to launch the Discord obviously during the pandemic, and we've gotten a ton of great feedback, and it's made IO a lot more accessible. Right, is that you can have like Lucy can just jump into the conversation.
Mhm.
But then yeah, like all the other like Discord channels that I feel like I'm a part of so many more now since all this started. Like I was on Discord before for like D&D and like a couple of like just like gaming ones, right?
Social stuff, yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Like it was like kind of funny and like some of the like video game centric things, but like people that I actually know and people that I talk to on a regular basis, this is the first time. And like I was the same. A lot of our tech stuff is still on Slack, but every single one of our meetings is in Discord. That's just
Mhm.
where we are, and that's where our members are, and that's where a lot of the IDM industry in Ontario is. So I definitely agree with you that it feels like we're closer together, but farther apart at the same time. But I'm hoping that we can kind of, now that COVID is slowly, hopefully,
Slowly.
that we can start getting back to that, and we can have the Canadian Game Awards in April, and we can all see each other in person, and we can like start to do these type of events again. Because I came
Mhm.
into the industry during COVID,
Oh, no.
so I've been able to go to a couple of events, but
Mhm.
most of my conversation, most of my interaction with people has been through Discord or been through Zoom, and it's great. I've been able to meet a lot of wonderful people, but I need that experience. Like you miss it because you've had it before. I've never had it, and I know what I'm missing.
There's honestly, there's nothing like GDC. Like, it's everyone always gets sick, so there's that, but,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a reason that people go there every year. Like, there's just something about that in-person connection, and, like, it's not about the talks, it's not about any of the actual industry stuff, it's about, at the end of the day, going to a bar with people or going to a restaurant with people and just talking,
These are
just,
these are
like,
my people.
sharing
Like these
stories.
are,
Yeah.
yeah. Like you're around your own, which you don't get very often.
It's like a hard reset for your brain because you get really kind of wrapped up in what your company is doing on a day-to-day basis, and you kind of like don't get that outside perspective as much. So seeing people in person and actually kind of like unwinding with them and sharing your horror stories or success stories or whatever they happen to be gives you a perspective about like what everybody else is doing, like what the temperature of the industry is, problems other people are having. And it just kind of like normalizes the whole thing. And it's like, oh, simultaneously, like our problems are not as bad as we thought because other people are having them too. It's not just us. But like just yeah, just like understanding the what's going on, that things that are affecting you are also affecting other people, or someone else will have a fresh perspective on something like, oh, that's a problem for you. Oh, we solved that using XYZ. And it's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Awesome. And then you come back to work after GDC just being like full of ideas and like actually full of enthusiasm again. And it's like a reset for burnout is kind of how I always looked at it, of like, oh, I just feel so down. It's been a long, cold, hard winter. And then you go down to California in March and you get a little bit of sunshine and you're like, oh, vitamin D, this is great. And then you actually get to talk to some game devs and you're just like, oh, right, this is why I'm in this industry. It's actually great. And then that keeps you going for another little bit. So
I hope you get to go to
I miss
GC
that.
this year.
I hope so. I hope so.
I
I've
feel like
missed
where
it.
you guys are in production, like you should be able to go, right? Like
Yeah,
hopefully,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't always get to go. We usually send at least one person. It's not always me, and that's okay.
Sure. But yeah,
But I miss
hopefully
it.
you guys get that.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up, is there anything that went left unsaid? Was there anything about Dawn of the Monsters that you wanted to pitch? Was there anything about the team? Anything about tea advice for people? Any of the above?
That's a good question. I don't think I have anything specific. Um, no, I mean, hmm, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have anything else.
I'll come back to you. I'll do the outro and then I'll come back to you if you got anything
Okay.
left. All right. So again, Steph, thank you for joining us today. I always enjoy. This is my highlight of my job. This is my favorite thing to do. To actually get to sit down and pick the brains of the people that create the projects that I fell in love with as a kid, and I've been able to enjoy for long enough. So a big thank you to Natalie, our producer, being on the ones and twos. Thank you, Natalie, as always, and thank you to Ontario Creates for their continued support. Also, IO is going to be at Megamigs. So if you see us, come talk to us, come say what's up, set up some meetings on Meet to Match. I'd love to meet and talk with all of you. So please feel free to come and say hi. Also, we're going to have another episode of Nordicity Recaps coming after Megamigs. So stay tuned, looking for that. That information will be announced the next couple of weeks. And make sure to check out the Lodge for all of your daily Ontario video game news. And yeah, Steph, is there anything else from you?
Yeah, I guess thinking about it, I just kind of want to call out, I guess, what I think is unique about working at 13 a.m.
Please.
Um, because we just got out of a meeting this morning where we were kind of just like, just our usual like weekly. I say Monday, it's Tuesday, but it's
It's
Monday
Monday.
because
It's
yesterday was
Monday.
a holiday.
Yeah.
Um, kind of like retrospective. Just trying to like reconnect as a team. But I think what what is the best part about working at 13 a.m. is that we just kind of like each other. Like it's just a nice place to work. It's just nice to come into work and be working with your friends rather than just like working with a bunch of impersonal people. Like over the 5 years that I've been here, like we've gone up to 13 people. We're down to 10, but it's pretty much the same core of people. We've gained a few new friends. We've lost a few along the way, but at the end of the day, like we all genuinely like working together. And it's cheesy to say like we're a family. I don't want to say that, but like we're friends first and employees second, which is difficult sometimes because sometimes you disagree with people and it's like, how do I say this without hurting my friends' feelings? But it does make working together easier. And I think it's part of the reason that this studio is still around after 8 years. Like 8 years as an indie studio is quite a long
Is a
time.
success. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
like most studios would have folded by now, and we've gotten close. Like I don't think there's any indie studio that just is smooth sailing the entire time. Like it's not easy to run an indie studio, but they've made it for 8 years, and I've been there for 5 of them, and it's been a fantastic ride through all of the ups and downs. And, yeah, I just wanna shout out 13 AM because 'cause they're a really fantastic group of people that make coming to work every day and actually being their producer, like, a complete joy. So,
Shout out to 13 a.m. games.
shout out to 13 AM.
Shout out to you,
You guys
Steph.
rock.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. It's been another episode of the Lodge podcast. And I will see all of you, Steph. Thank you again. And I will see all of you soon. Take care.